like to do, this is going to be a pretty general program talking about Cheyenne Bottoms. Some of you guys might be very familiar with it, others of you might not be very familiar with it. And so we're going to give just some background information about what is important about Cheyenne Bottoms, why it is such a unique place for the state of Kansas. And then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the birds that are here, some of the unique ones, which I'm sure most of you guys are very familiar with. So we'll go through some of that. But then I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of the updates of what the drought's doing out there to us, and then also some of the work that's been done at Cheyenne Bottoms here in the last year, or a couple of years anyway, that have really improved some things, and makes me excited about when we do get water back. And then I'll kind of finish talking about the place I work at the Kansas Wetlands Education Center a little bit. So I will mention up here on my little pop-up banner, you see that this is something new that we just did up, and it's as you can see on the top, it says, "Have you seen our bottoms?" But it has a QR code. If you're interested, that QR code will take you to a virtual tour of Cheyenne Bottoms. It's on our website that you can access. Something we put together during COVID, actually, and I think it turned out pretty neat. It's got all sorts of little interviews of some of the key people that are out there at Cheyenne Bottoms. It has some 360-degree photos. It has some drone photographs of the bottoms. And so if you're interested, you're welcome to go to that QR code, or just go to our website and you can access that from our homepage there. So I think we'll get started. And what I'd like to do first, and I kind of sprinkled them in throughout the presentation. Here a few years ago, we were able to produce a video, and we typically have this available to visitors that come to Cheyenne Bottoms and to the Wetlands Education Center. We offer it to everyone that walks in the door just about, a little 15-minute video that talks about what Cheyenne Bottoms is and a nice intro. And so I've got a few pieces of that, not the whole thing, but a few pieces that we'll kind of get into, and gives you a nice idea of what it should be looking like. And we'll talk more about here too. You'll probably recognize the voice. We had Mike Blair do this, who many of you might be very familiar with. And the nice thing about Mike was that he had basically all the footage there. He had to come out and do so little. He was able to put together stuff that he had over the years, and did a really nice job. So we'll start in with that. just some background information there about Cheyenne Bottoms, and it kind of talks a little bit about it, that we're talking about a 41,000 acre wetland complex that's there in Barton County. And with that number, it's considered to be the largest marsh on the interior of the United States. So a humongous area. And that 41,000 acres is kind of divided up and managed by several different groups. The largest part of that, 21,000 acres that's owned and managed by the Department of Wildlife and Parks. And then a little over 8,000 acres that is owned and managed by the Nature Conservancy. And then there's still a pretty good portion around the perimeter of the basin that's privately owned. So again, such a unique place though to have in the middle of Kansas. And so many people coming through Kansas do not realize that we've got this incredibly important wetland there. And so scenes like this are so foreign to so many people coming to central Kansas. So we'll talk more about that as we go here. So who really cares? Well, as many of you guys know, we sit on this North American Central Flyway, and with that, we get a lot of migrant birds that come through here. And especially for things like shorebirds and waterfowl, they're looking for very particular types of habitat. They don't have a lot of options as they're making their treks through the middle part of the United States anyway. And that's what Cheyenne Bottoms provides, as many of you know. It's a stopover place. It's a stopover for these birds as they're on their migration path to come in during that spring and fall migration, to stop, to rest, to eat, put on some energy reserves just so they can make it to their next destination. So while we're really known for the birds that stop there, a lot of those birds we get are only there for maybe a couple hours, maybe a few days, maybe a couple weeks, and then they're on to their next area. So it is an important place to have. And so across the U.S., as you know, there are these flyways, these bird highways that birds kind of follow as they migrate. Now, some of the research these days have kind of blurred these lines a little bit, but I still like the concept of having flyways that are across the U.S., and I think it still kind of fits anyway. So obviously we sit on the central flyway, and Cheyenne Bottoms is this place kind of right in the middle of that provides this stopover. So picture yourself as a bird migrating. You're not just the cardinal or blue jay that you see in your backyard. You're a shorebird. You're spending your entire life on beaches and shorelines, maybe in the Gulf of Mexico, maybe even down in South America. And as you're traveling north, since it's springtime, we'll say you're traveling north to head to your breeding ground, you're flying over Kansas, you don't have a lot of options for the type of habitat that you're really looking for. This would be kind of what you're seeing. Obviously, there's some big reservoirs like this one up here or this one over here, but in general, you see a lot of grass and cropland, and not exactly the hospitable type of habitat that you're looking for. Right here, smack dab in the center of Kansas, is this thing called Cheyenne Bottoms, and so obviously that's kind of looking like a beacon for a lot of these birds as they come through the area. And so this is kind of the area of Cheyenne Bottoms with the wetland that's here. Now, the analogy that I've used ever since I started working at the center is that, birds aren't much different than us when we travel. When we go on these big long trips, we have to have places that we stop and rest and eat and that sort of thing as well. And we have marketers that have us, right? What do they put on the side of the highway to advertise what's there? Well, giant billboards, right? Well, my analogy has always been that Cheyenne Bottoms is kind of like the McDonald's for birds. When we're traveling down the highway, we see the golden arches, we know what resources we can get there. Birds are no different. When they see a place like Cheyenne Bottoms, they know the resources that are available to them there. Now, I can take this one step further because, as many of you guys know, we have this incredible wetland right here in the middle of the state, but we don't just have the benefit of one of these, we have a second one. Just like you guys travel, you might want choices. Well, birds kind of have that same choice because 40 miles south of Cheyenne Bottoms is another wetland, and as many of you know, it's called Quivira National Wildlife Refuge. A whole nother wetland that we could spend a whole nother talk on in talk about it at some point too. But my analogy goes, if Cheyenne Bottoms is kind of the McDonald's, then Quivira is kind of the Wendy's that's down there, providing a little bit different resource, and but both are very important, and they're important stopovers for these birds. We're going to spend most of our time here talking about Cheyenne Bottoms, but if you have questions about Quivira, I can probably answer some of those too a little bit later on. So this is that 41,000 acre basin, as can be seen here. A couple things that I want to point out here is on this part, the main part of Cheyenne Bottoms, if you have been out to Cheyenne Bottoms, you know that there's dikes that divide up Cheyenne Bottoms. So this is the state area of Cheyenne Bottoms that's divided into basically 9 different pools. That's all about managing water. We won't get into a lot of that here, but when the state took over the area in the late 40s and into the 50s, that was part of their plan, was to try to maximize the number of years that Cheyenne Bottoms had water. Wetlands in that part of the state just don't work. The math doesn't add up. Our evaporation rates can be upwards of 60 inches of water a year. We only have about 25 inches of rain every year. And so that doesn't work for wetlands. And in fact, before the state took over the area, Cheyenne Bottoms would be dry about 2 out of every 5 years. Well, obviously a dry wetland does not, as we know here over the last couple of years, doesn't do the birds much good when they're stopping through. They're not going to stop because the resource isn't there. And so the state, in putting in this dike system, they use some of the pools for storage, so they can store water, and then they can distribute that water during the times of year when they really need it, during the spring and fall migration. And so these outer pools are kind of the ones that they manage for habitat for the most part, and they'll try to be sure to have good habitat and water in there during those critical times. So this is the state area. So this is the 20,000 acres about that's operated by Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, and so they operate that. There is a refuge area in here that's closed off, but then there's about 13,000 acres of that that's open to public access activities. Hunting, bird watching, all those types of uses of that area are important, and that's part of their management plan. There are other parts of Cheyenne Bottoms Basin as well, though, and another significant one is the area that's owned by the Nature Conservancy. So Nature Conservancy has about 8,000 acres. We'll talk a little bit later about some of their projects that they're working on right now. Little different management style. Obviously, it's not there so much for recreational purposes. It's really there to preserve that area. It's set aside for the wildlife. And they're going to do everything they can to maximize the habitat diversity and for particular goals, specifically grassland nesting birds and shorebirds that are using that area. So there's that. And then there's a lot of these little pockets that are still privately owned, and then along the outer rim of the basin out here is all privately owned. And those people that own that land, they farm it, they ranch it, they do whatever that that they kind of want on their property. A couple other things just to put in here. Where the Wetlands Education Center is, where I work, is here on the southeast corner, right along 156 Highway. Just like Mark said, if you haven't been there, I'll invite you numerous times tonight to come and check us out. And then the other thing is there is the National Scenic Byway. Back in 2005, there was a group of citizens that kind of got together and they established the Wetlands and Wildlife Scenic Byway. It was then designated a National Scenic Byway, one of just 2 in Kansas, the other one being the Flint Hills. But this is basically a 77-mile route that starts over here west of Hoisington and takes people around and provides a way to get down to Quivira, with the 2 wetlands being the anchor points of that byway. There's signage, there's interpretive stuff, there's all sorts of things that go along with the byway. So if you're not familiar with that, you can definitely check that out. So this is another nice visual of Cheyenne Bottoms, because we get asked all the time, well, how did Cheyenne Bottoms form? And the best answer is I don't really know. We just don't have great information to tell us exactly how it formed, but looking at this is that 41,000 acre thing, and there's no doubt that there's this definite ridge line of highland and then lowland making up the basin of Cheyenne Bottoms. Our best guess is that, thousands and thousands of years ago, there was very deep layers of limestone and salt that dissolved and created basically a giant sinkhole. Everyone looks at this though and they say, that looks like an impact crater. And yes, it does, being as circular as it is, but there's no real evidence of that or to back that theory up. So, but this gives you a nice perspective of what the land looks like and the topography of the land making up Cheyenne Bottoms. Back to the birds. We're going to spend a little time talking about some of the unique birds that you can see at Cheyenne Bottoms. And again, you know, these numbers, and there's some debate about some of these percentages, but even if these percentages aren't correct, and I'm fine with them not being correct, there's no doubt about it, we see a significant portion of many shorebird populations that come to Cheyenne Bottom and come through there. And so that you know, you can't really argue that point. Overall, we have 357 species that have been documented at Cheyenne Bottoms, and again, what we're really known for are the waterfowl and shorebird numbers that are there. So we'll kind of skim through some of these, just so show you some nice photos of some of the birds that are popular to come to Cheyenne Bottoms to see. And we'll start out with waterfowl. Right now, if you want to see ducks, you need to come to Cheyenne Bottoms. We have about, even with the limited water we have, about every species of duck that could be there is there right now. And so this is just a handful of some of the duck species that are very common, and it's just fun to see them in all their glory of the drake color plumages right now, and seeing them. So all of these species can be seen. If you go out there right now, you'll see every single one of these. I can almost guarantee it right now. There's your wake-up call for the evening, in case I've already put you to sleep. We also get huge congregations of geese. So this winter we had some large numbers of snow geese that were hanging out at Cheyenne Bottoms. It's not uncommon for us to hold 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 snow geese as they're staging to head north. This year we were probably there were several times we were probably 200,000 to 300,000 snow geese that were there, but it can be pretty impressive. Along with other species. We have Canada geese that are starting to nest and that sort of thing that'll be there throughout the summer. And we have white-fronted geese, cacklers, Ross's geese, all those there. I will mention, you might have seen on the news that we did have quite an outbreak of avian influenza this last winter. We had a fair number, it seemed to be affecting the snow geese and Ross's geese the most. I feel pretty fortunate that it didn't seem to escalate more than what it did, but this winter, as you drove around Cheyenne Bottoms, there was no doubt you would see some dead geese along the side, unfortunately. And it was right before we got that big cold snap, and then the cold snap came, froze up the bottoms, and the geese left, and it kind of worried me that they were just going to spread that elsewhere, and maybe they did. But after that, after the geese came back, we really weren't seeing any signs of sick geese or dead geese after that. So we're hoping that gets better as we go. What I like to see at Cheyenne Bottoms are the wading birds. So things like our American avocet, black-necked stilt, white-faced ibis, great birds to come and see from the spring into the summer. All of these birds will nest at Cheyenne Bottoms, these here, and so they're a great one to come see. We actually, last week, already saw our first avocets and black-necked stilts, which is close to a month early, but we actually saw some of those first ones returning last week. Some of our other wading birds, a couple of these a little later on in the summer, are egret species, the snowy egrets, great egrets, and cattle egrets. Great blue herons are basically a resident all year. Even in the dead of winter, we'll have a couple that stay and try to survive the cold. And I don't know what they're eating, but they're able to find something because we'll have a couple that stay all winter. The shorebirds is probably what draws most of the bird watchers out. All these little guys, the plovers and sandpipers, are what most people really like to come see. So things like killdeer, which you can see all over, but they are a shorebird. People don't realize that, even though you see them in grassland areas and that sort of thing, they are technically a shorebird. They're a plover species, and they're very numerous. out there right now. Things like long-billed dowitchers are very common, and if you guys have ever seen dowitchers, this is mostly how you see them when you see them, poking down in the mud, looking for their food. And so, reason people call them sewing machine birds, right? So, again, one of my favorites, though. So, other sandpiper species that give some of the bird watchers fits are very common, and you can come out and see a good number of them, like leaf sandpipers and other ones of those as we get to. On here. The idea, or the question is, well, what are those dowitchers and what are those things eating? Well, this is the reason why these birds are stopping at Cheyenne Bottoms. It is a giant bird buffet. Most of these sandpiper species are eating insects. Very few of them are going to be eating seeds or anything like that. And so they're reliant on insects and invertebrates that they're finding. Wetlands are a phenomenal place for that. Wetlands are one of the most productive ecosystems out there, and so we get lots and lots of these insect larvae that are, many of which are aquatic. This is one of the bases of our food chain called a bloodworm. These are a midge fly larvae, so this is the adult form. Look like these little gnat things. In the middle of the summer, oftentimes as you're traveling down the road, you'll see these huge clouds of these like gnat things. Those are typically going to be these non-biting midges, and they lay their eggs in the water. They sink down into the muck and mud. They hatch out into the larval form of these bloodworms. And some of the studies have shown that in 1 square meter of mud out at Cheyenne Bottoms, there can literally be like 64,000 of these bloodworms. So highly productive. If you're a bird sticking your nose down in that mud, in 1 square meter, if there's 64,000, pretty good chance you're going to find one here and there. So a great food source for many birds, but many other aquatic insects also out there that these birds are feeding on. Another one, just because they're one of my favorites, the phalaropes. These guys come through in the spring and fall, and you can see them. And if you're not familiar with phalaropes, when you see them, you'll never forget them because of what they do. These are the birds that spin. And again, when we take people out to Cheyenne Bottoms and that have never seen shorebirds before, you go and see a big group of these all spinning, people are dumbfounded. They're saying, what are these birds? And where have they been my whole life? And Cheyenne Bottoms is a great place to see this type of phenomenon. Other cool birds and that draw a lot of visitors to us are the cranes. Whooping cranes especially. And last week, if you were on the bird watch stuff, there was 10 of these that were spotted at Cheyenne Bottoms. We're right in the heart of the migration of whooping cranes. I hope to see more this spring. Most of them, by the reports from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, show that most of them are still south of us. So hopefully we get some good days where they come in and see us. So with whooping cranes, many of you guys are familiar with them. Still one of the most endangered birds of North America. These are the ones you go back to the 1940s, and there were 16 birds left in the world. And right now, in this flyway, in the natural migrating flock, there's over 500, but still not a lot, obviously. And so seeing 10 of them at one time is pretty cool to be able to see them. Whooping cranes are the tallest bird in North America. They stand 5 foot tall, 7-foot wingspan. They're humongous birds, and pretty awesome to be able to see them. We also get sandhill cranes coming through, and oftentimes you'll see them. We've been seeing sandhill cranes for probably a month and a half now. Migrating through the area, and of course these are the ones that gather up on the Platte River and in huge numbers, and so if you haven't seen them before, go do that. For the whooping cranes, if you didn't know their range, so the natural population is this Aransas population that overwinters down on the Texas coast, down at Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, around Corpus Christi, Texas area. Even though their numbers have gotten big enough that they're definitely venturing out, and their wintering ground has definitely expanded over the last years, where it used to be pretty narrow there around Aransas. But So they're venturing out, which is a good thing. And then they come right through here through Kansas and make their way up to their breeding grounds up at Wood Buffalo National Park, which is up in the Northwest Territories of Canada. Another cool bird, just got to throw this one in there. One of my favorite wetland birds that you can see is the American bittern. I've got a little video here from the 4 Days Ornithology class that was out quite a few years ago, but pretty cool. If you don't know, this is a bird that will respond very well to calls. And so, if you've never heard their call, it has a very strange bird call, not like anything else that you'll ever hear. So this video the class was actually using the recorded call that you'll hear first, but then you'll see how the bird reacts to it. That's the recorded calling, but you see the bird that's checking it out and saying, hey, I know that sound. Flies in for a closer look, and it starts calling back. Now I know that, you can see bitterns in a lot of places, even here at Chisholm Creek Park. I know that there's bitterns every once in a while, but very secretive birds, not ones that you get to see a lot, but when you do, kind of a fun thing as well. There are lots and lots of other cool wildlife to see besides the birds. And so lots of mammal species, reptiles, insects, plant communities, all things that are worthwhile to come out and study and check out at Cheyenne Bottoms as well. And so we're going to go back to the video and look at a few of the other examples of wildlife that you can see at Cheyenne Bottoms. So again, some really cool animals to be seen out at Cheyenne Bottoms just about any time of year. People are always asking, well, when should I come to Cheyenne Bottoms? What's the best time of year? And of course the answer is whenever. It is so seasonal that it really doesn't matter when you go out there. You're always going to be able to see stuff, whether it's the winter, summer, spring, fall, it doesn't really matter. Now, for birds, if you want to see the most number of birds and the most diversity of birds, the spring migration is kind of an all-at-once thing. And so the last 2 weeks of April, first 2 weeks of May is typically kind of our peak of the spring migration. And that's the time to be there because literally everything is there. But for this year and for the last couple years, probably our biggest question that we get is, what's it like out there? And the drought is still really affecting us. We're going on, I don't know, 3-4 years now, something like that, of some pretty extremely dry weather and in our part of the state. Even a couple years where other parts of the state, literally just east of us, were getting rains, we were missing out. And so we went from having some decent water in like 2020, 2021 to being totally dry the second half of 2022 and through the first half of 2023. Last June, we were bone dry, no water in any of the pools, and we did get some rains out west of us that they were able to capture some of that coming down the Walnut Creek. We have a diversion and water rights where water can be diverted off of Walnut Creek and the York River, and there was enough water coming down that they were able to capture a good portion of that and put it into one of the storage pools. Without that, we would still be dry because that is literally the only water that we have is from that water that we got last June. And so it's still pretty dire and doesn't look great. I threw in this little video clip. This is from the USGS. Did a little thing just kind of showing the effects of drought, and I think it's a nice illustration of what's going on out at Cheyenne Bottoms. So.
Summer typically replenish the water levels in the marshland, making it a key stopover for thousands of migrating birds and rest. In the fall of 2022, the birds found nothing to stop for. Landsat images show not only the lack of water, but also an overall lack of healthy green vegetation due to drought conditions in the region. USGS, Science for a Changing World.
So in 2022, we were bone dry, and through most of 2023, and now we're still kind of limping along. It kind of appears, looking at the cycles of things and how things dry out, that we seem to be on this 10-year drought cycle. If you go back, we were in the same position in 2012 into 2013. It was a 6-inch rain in August of 2013 that kind of broke that drought for us and kind of filled everything up. We're still waiting on that this year, hopefully. And then before that, if you look at, 2013, if you look at early 2000s, we had a pretty dry cycle then as well, and then the early 90s, we had a pretty dry cycle as well. So it just seems like there is definitely a cyclical nature of the drought for the Cheyenne Bottoms area anyway. So we'll see. We are waiting. We're hoping that we can get through this and break this drought and have some water again in the wetlands. So. The silver lining of being dry is that it did come at a perfect timing for when a lot of work could be done. In 2018, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks applied for and were awarded a $6 million grant using the federal Pittman-Robertson funds. These are the funds that fund a huge portion of wildlife and parks based off of the excise tax on arms and ammunition. So a big part of wildlife and parks budget is funded by hunters specifically and shooting sports. And they were able to get $6 million extra just to put into some infrastructure improvements at Cheyenne Bottoms. So over the last about 4 years, they've used the $6 million to do a lot of work. And with that being said, I really think that once we get water back at Cheyenne Bottoms, the bottoms are going to be in as good a shape as they've been in probably 40 to 50 years. which is pretty exciting. Some of the projects that have been completed with this project, they were able to get a lot of new equipment. So some new tractors, some discs that they've been using a lot. They got this thing called the Marsh Master, which is basically like a skid steer on pontoons that can go anywhere in the wetlands, and then they can put different attachments on it and do all sorts of work with it. They were able to replace 13 of the electric water pumps that they used to move water around through the different pools. They were able to stabilize some of the water control gates, which hadn't been touched since they were put in the 1950s. They were able to replace the big drop structure that's on the inlet canal. They redid all the concrete work and that sort of thing, so that's much more efficient. They replaced 10 water control gates, again, many of which weren't operable because they were still with 1950s technology there. They've done a lot of silt removal. So silt is probably the biggest problem that the managers at Cheyenne Bottoms are facing. It creates the habitat for cattails to take over for a lot of other issues. And so they've removed a lot of the silt in order to help get water where it needs to go and to provide better habitat. They've done a lot of spraying of Phragmites. If you're not familiar, Phragmites is an incredibly invasive plant. It's all over the state. Just about every waterway that you go across, you're going to see Phragmites, and it's a terrible, terrible plant. It spreads incredibly quickly. It has almost no wildlife value whatsoever, and it's a real problem at almost any wetland or lake in Kansas. So they've done aerial spraying. They've done various spraying techniques to try to combat that. They did put in a brand new office over at Cheyenne Bottoms. On the west side is the maintenance office. Many of you guys, if you've been out there, you know they were working out of the same office that was built back in the 50s and 60s, I believe, and it looked like it, and it was in pretty bad shape, and so they were able to put a new office and a new shop in there. They've installed 2 new bulk toilets. One of them is at the campground. The other one is there by the office. They also expanded the campground. They're able to expand it. There's a little primitive campground on the west side of the Bottoms, and they expanded it to include a much bigger area. They put in all new kiosks. They're not quite done with that. The structure is there, but they don't have the panels up yet. And then, most recently, they've been working on the goose pen renovation. Some of you that know the history of Cheyenne Bottoms know that I think it was back in the 80s, there was a big push to propagate geese in the state and all over the place. We've done a little too good a job at that, but Cheyenne Bottoms was one of the places where they put in these goose pens, a large area where they would actually put nuisance geese. They would go capture them and put them there, get them used to the area so that they would nest there and then kind of go from there. That area has kind of come under disrepair over time, and so there's a project to renovate that, not to put geese back there, but to provide more habitat, more wetland habitat that's functional, and also a youth hunting marsh. And that's what that will be used for. So here's just some photos, just some snapshot. This is that Marsh Master piece that they had. Like I said, they did a lot of aerial spraying for the Phragmites. This is the new pump that they put in near Pool 2. So Pool 2 is up here. This is the largest pool, and they really have no ability to de-water that pool. There's no way to get water out of there, and so this pump is going to allow them to hopefully get water out of Pool 2 so that they can get in there when it is dry and do some habitat work. This is the brand new office and shed. The old office sat back here, and so it's gone. Yes, the barn owls are still in their sheds over here, for those of you that know that. This is the goose pen area that they've done a lot of digging out and deepening of some of those pools. The wildlife and parks area, the state wildlife area, isn't the only area that's gone through some renovations and stuff. The Nature Conservancy area has also had some pretty significant things go on too. Biggest thing is they've acquired 2 large pieces of property in the last few years. This was through grants through Ducks Unlimited that purchased the land, and so there was a half section right here just west of the Wildlife and Parks office is now owned and managed by Ducks Unlimited and Nature Conservancy. And then up here by Red Wing, this whole section up here is now also under operation of them as well. One of the cool projects is this one down here. This piece of property was in crop production for years and years and years. And with that, they had channelized a little stream long time ago to go around, to take water from this area and bring it around into the ditch going along the river. What they've done is they've actually restored that stream and the wetlands that are associated with it. And this is a picture of what's there today, of what they've done with this. And so this is a whole new habitat that's available. There is a parking area over here, and people, I think, are allowed to walk in there and to access this piece of property. So this is over here right across from the Wildlife and Parks office in this area. So kind of a neat thing, some neat restoration stuff. They're doing a similar thing up by Red Wing. I would love to see, because this was the first place I ever saw burrowing owls. Many of you guys remember the burrowing owls that were up there on the prairie dog towns that were up there. Those prairie dog towns at some point were poisoned and were no longer. And it'd be cool if we could get prairie dogs up there again. We'll see. So, okay. All right. Last little piece. I just want to spend a little time talking about the Wetlands Education Center, because still people come to Cheyenne Bottoms from all over the place. You have bird watchers, hunters, kids, just having fun, researchers, photographers, and again, just the general public that come to Cheyenne Bottoms to do what they want to do there. And so that leads me to the place where I work that is a nice place for these people to come. And so our mission at the Wetlands Education Center is to educate people about wetland communities, their importance, and the need for conservation and restoration.
To any understanding of Cheyenne Bottoms, the Kansas Wetlands Education Center is located just off Highway 156 at the south end of the Public Wildlife Area. Here, the value of wetlands is explored through dioramas, interpretive displays, and interactive exhibits, providing important general knowledge about these special habitats. Visitors are always impressed with the facility's modern, relaxed atmosphere, owned and managed by Fort Hays State University in cooperation with the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. Area auto tours are also conducted by special appointment and at many events. Since construction and dedication in 2009, the Coke Wetlands Exhibit Hall receives numerous school and tour groups each year, providing hands-on science and outdoors discovery opportunities. Interrelationships between local plant and animal communities, as well as broad values and conservation needs of American wetlands, are vital educational goals for all ages. The center is especially instructive and exciting for youngsters. On-site events and outreach average 600 programs annually. The center also features a live animal collection, providing live histories and close-up views of about 30 local wildlife species. The Wetlands Center is a perfect first stop for information about Cheyenne Bottoms.
So the center, if you haven't been there, again, I want to invite you to come visit us. If you haven't been there in the last 5 years or so, we actually did a big exhibit renovation. We were able to, through a grant, a local grant there, we're able to replace a lot of the exhibits, and our whole goal was to make them much more interactive. The original exhibits were great, but there were a lot of text on boards, and we wanted to get them much more interactive, especially for kiddos. And so every piece that we installed has interactive components, everything from our floor projection system, which is kind of like a game, to the watershed sandbox, to various other puzzles and that sort of thing that talk about various things. And so, wonderful thing to come and see that if it's been a few years since you've been to the Wetlands Education Center. We also do tons of programming. As the video talked about, we average 600 to 700 programs a year. many of those with school groups, going out to schools, having schools come to us, and so that's a huge part of what we do. We have a wonderful auditorium that we use for those classes and programs as well. Our classroom is used for those programs, but also doubles as our live animal exhibit. So it's not being used for programs. We invite the visitors to go in and check out all the live animals that we have. We have a wonderful gift store. You know, I don't know if it's as good as the one here, but it's a wonderful place with field guides and shirts and all that stuff, and also quite a few local artist pieces that we sell as well. We have a little nature trail that takes about a half-mile little loop, goes to the little treat area that's next to the education center, and then around the marsh and back to the parking lot. And we also do tours. So if you've never been out to Cheyenne Bottoms and are afraid that you're going to get lost, we will take you out. We have a 12-passenger van, and we do van tours. Typically, we either do just a quick little 30-minute tour to at least show you where things are at and come back. More popular, those are 90-minute tour where we'll take you out and try to look for some of the birds and other wildlife that you can find. So, we do some other tours as well. In the past, we've done prairie chicken lek tours. We have our big Wings and Wetlands Birding Festival. A couple of you that have helped with that in the past. We haven't done it for quite a few years, mostly because of the drought, and so we'll see where that goes in the future. Our lek tours, our prairie chicken lek tours, we had to cancel them again this year because our birds seem to be gone off our lek, unfortunately. And so hopefully get those back someday as well. So we are there as a visitor center. We're open coming up on our spring hours starting April 1st. We'll be open 7 days a week, Monday through Saturday 9 to 5 and Sunday 1 to 5. And a great place to come. It's all free, no admission, kind of like the Great Plains Nature Center here. And so wonderful place to come. If you haven't, check out our website, check out our Facebook site, and see what things are going on there. And with that, I would love to take any questions or any comments or questions that anyone has. Yes, right up here.
The birds are flying over, and they don't see any water down there.
Yep.
Are they stopping?
Nope. They keep going and going. So what I assume, birds I think are much more adaptable than what we probably give them credit for. They're just surviving. If there's not the resource that they need there's no reason for them to stop. They're going to keep going and try to find the next place. The problem is that next place could be a mile up the road. It could be 300 miles up the road, and it could be to their detriment, obviously. I do think that shorebirds and that sort of thing are probably going to use the reservoirs, and because if we're in a drought, a lot of times the reservoirs are kind of drawn down. There's a lot more shore exposed. And so that's going to provide a little bit more of the habitat they're looking for. So Wilson Lake, Canopolis Lake probably gets a few more shorebirds stopping there than what they would in a normal year on Cheyenne Bottoms there. The problem though is, Kansas did at one time have a lot more wetlands. Not that it was ever just full of wetlands, but there used to be a lot more wetlands and playa lakes and that sort of thing. And so many of those have been drained. And so it puts that much more emphasis on a place like Cheyenne Bottoms. So Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira are the place for them to stop, as opposed to back in the day when they had a lot more options. And so yeah, we hear all the time the declining numbers of some of these birds, and it all is related there, what's available to them. Yeah, but no, when we're dry, it's a lonely place out there for us. We don't see much activity. It's like the surface of the moon. Yes. Yes.
You talked about rainfall. Is that what you depend on for water, or is
Yep.
there groundwater?
For the most part, Cheyenne Bottoms is totally dependent on surface water and surface water runoff. So we get very little input coming up from underneath. That's one of the differences between us and Quivira. Quivira does get a lot more springs that feed that wetland. Case in point, back in 2012, when we went through that drought, both wetlands were bone dry going into the winter of 2012. We didn't get any more precipitation, but throughout that winter of 2012, Quivira suddenly had water. it was because those springs had opened up and they were starting to get some inflow. Cheyenne Bottoms is so reliant on what falls on the basin and what falls in the watersheds. The two natural sources of water are Blood Creek and Deception Creek that come in from the north and the west. That's what feeds the wetlands naturally. Now, the state of Kansas also has water rights, I just mentioned briefly there, that they can divert water off of Walnut Creek and the Ark River. And so there's diversion dams that they can bring up through an inlet canal system to help supplement. The problem there is that those rivers aren't running like they did back in the 1950s when that was put in. And so that's not a very reliable source of water either.
What about irrigation?
Yep. So, there's the big problem is the irrigation that's happening from groundwater causing things like the Walnut Creek and Ark River not to flow like they did. Case in point, the same problems that Clavera is facing right now with their water right, Cheyenne Bottoms went through the exact same thing in the 80s, 90s there, and exactly the same. And it's all goes back to that thing. Yes, sir?
What's the status of the solar project?
Yeah, so if you haven't heard in the news, there's a proposal right now for a large solar development project that it would be placed almost adjacent to Cheyenne Bottoms on the south side. Right now, the planning commission has been meeting to decide what the rules are going to be for solar development in the countywide, not just for that project, but for the whole county. Their proposal, just this last week, that they're sending to the commissioners to vote on is to have a 2-mile no-build zone around Cheyenne Bottoms. So no build of any solar development for large scale. You can still have one on your house, those things is fine. But large scale solar development, their proposal is a 2-mile buffer, no build zone around Cheyenne Bottoms. Beyond that, everywhere else in the county will be a conditional use permit application. It has to be filled out. Don't know exactly how the commission is going to take it. They can accept it, they can reject it, and it'll go back to the planning commission, but we're not sure. Not particularly. There's really nothing that they can do until the permits go out for it. They really don't have any say because it's all on private ground. And so unless there's endangered species that would be affected directly and that sort of thing, there's really not much that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or the State Department of Wildlife Work can do at this point. So. Yes, sir?
Can you talk about campgrounds on the west side?
Yeah. So there is a small primitive campground, be about 2 miles or a mile and a half off of 281 highway, and about a half mile from Cheyenne Bottoms entrance there. It's right along the inlet canal, so there's some nice big cottonwood trees there. It's probably about, I'd say maybe about 2 acres of area, just a primitive site. There's no reservations or anything. It's just a first come, first serve. There's some picnic tables, some fire rings, and now a vault toilet there. And it's just totally open for anyone to come and stay. So no utilities or anything like that, besides the vault toilet. But nice little place, and it gets used quite often. Anyone else? Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I did bring some brochures about the bottoms, about the Wetlands Education Center, about the byway. Help yourself to those. Again, check out our little virtual tour if you'd like on our website. And again, invite you to come spend some time. Even though we don't have all the water, it's still a wonderful place to be, and it would be worth your trip this spring, I think, to come out and check it out.
Thank you.